Thank you, Alma. And just for your newsletter, Breakfast with the Chief in March will be Sergeant Greg Shipperett. He's going to be talking about some initiatives within the department, and we're going to touch on some scams. I know that was something that...
It's an egg, sausage, and cheese on an English muffin with hash browns.
Okay. Sounds
Good.
So I'll give you a brief update. I'd ask that you tune in to the select board meeting next Tuesday. The police department's on the agenda for a few things. One, we're going to talk about this program from Safety Net. And basically, if you remember, there's that device to find stolen cars called LoJack. And this is a device for people, to find people. So it could be someone that maybe has autism, that walks away, or with dementia. And it's going to be basically a program that you're able to sign up for. Very happy, Alma's supporting that. You have Officer Sabati here today. He's going to be doing the presentation on it. He did a lot of hard work on it. But a great tool to keep folks safe, and I'm really proud to say we're a part of that. And one of the select board members, Shelby Marshall, kind of brought it to our attention, and then with the fire department and the police department, the senior center, we partnered up and we got it done. The other thing I wanted to share is at the select board meetings, we're going to talk about accreditation. We received our certification, and I'm very proud of that. I'm going to have Lieutenant Daniels give you a brief update on that. Thank you. I'll have him a brief update on that, and then I'll introduce my bosses here, the town manager and the superintendent of schools is here to talk about the budget. You want to give a quick update?
Thank you, everyone. Lieutenant Mike Daniels from the Westborough Police Department. So, keep it brief. On February 15th, myself, Chief Lourie, Deputy Chief Minardi, and Sergeant Greg Shipperett went to Marlborough, where we were awarded certification for accreditation, which is a significant milestone for us. I know I've been here a few times, and we've talked about accreditation every time I've been here, and just really giving you updates, but this is significant because it shows that Westborough Police Department is compliant with a lot of things that we're seeing coming down from the Commonwealth with regards to post, our peace officers' standards and training. So we're all in line with that. Right now we are scheduled for accelerated accreditation. We're actually moving extremely fast. We've been working probably about 12 hours a day between myself, Sergeant Shipperett, and some of the other members of the command staff getting this up and running. This was a significant priority for us, so we attacked it aggressively, and we're looking, hopefully, in March, we're going to have a team of assessors coming in to evaluate, again, all our policies and procedures, the buildings, our equipment, and pretty much everything that we have, areas of liability. So hopefully when that's done, within a few months after, we'll probably be hearing back from the commission. My thought is that we will be successful because we just recently had a mock assessment, and the results came back extremely favorable. There were some minor tweaks that we had to make to some of our policies and to some of our equipment. We've made those corrections within a week or two after receiving their recommendations. So I believe that we're going to be successful. Once we achieve that, then the process is ongoing. It's not something that we just do one time and it's done. We're going to be reevaluated every 18 months to ensure that we're keeping up with all the things that we said that we were going to do, and to ensure that we're keeping up with all our policies and updating them regularly. So with that being said, that is the update for certification. We're extremely proud. We got our plaque. We already mounted it in the lobby, and we're extremely proud of it. It's a lot of hard work, and it's an extreme team effort. So thank you very much.
It's something that's to report. We're the first department in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts with version 6. So what does that mean? It means that we are compliant with what the lieutenant was talking about with the state, and what that also brought is a lot more work, because we have all these departments across the Commonwealth that are reaching out to us, that MPAC is sending to us to help them through with version 6. So it's really kind of putting us on the map, so to speak, and I'm really proud of the really hard work the entire team did, specifically Lieutenant Daniels and Sergeant Chipra, who will be here next month to talk about a few initiatives and things that we're really, really proud of. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Kristi Williams and Amber Bock, and they're going to present the budget. And I look forward to seeing you next month, and please tune in to the Select Board meeting Tuesday night.
Good morning. My name is Kristi Williams. I'm the town manager. I did bring draft copies of the town meeting warrant. Town meeting is on March 25th, so if you don't have them on your tables, I'm happy to pass them out. This is not the final version of the warrant, but it does include 37 articles. So.
Wow.
So I'm going to present the FY24 budget and capital plan. We always want to show this because we're really proud of the fact that the town has earned the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. A couple years ago, we started following the Government Financial Officers Association guidelines. So I would encourage anyone who hasn't had a chance to look through the budget. It is a really long document, but it does give a lot of narrative information about the town, where the different departments are at in terms of goals, long-term and short-term, and really just looking at what your departments are doing for you each year. This is a slide showing our budget process. So we start back in September. We held a tri-board meeting. We've been doing that the past couple of years. So that's the select board, the advisory finance committee, and the school committee. And the purpose of that is to really look at things that we think will be budget pressures in the upcoming year, so we can start to think about how we might handle that. And then we move through. We have the capital planning deadlines where the departments submit all of their capital requests. And then we do a lot of internal work, looking at budgets. We sit with each department head. We look through the budget. We make decisions about what's going to be included in the upcoming budget. Then we do the budget hearing in January, and then we have annual town meeting in March. This year, we structured our internal process a little bit different. We asked all of the department heads to submit a level service budget, so a budget that includes all of the services that they currently provide. Included in that would be any inflationary costs, so anything attributed to the cost of providing the services that they currently provide in FY23. And then we had a separate form that each department could fill out called the Program Improvement Request. So that form was for anything new, any new service that they wanted to provide to the community, inclusive of any new positions that they were asking for. And this really gave us a good understanding of the cost of doing business as we currently do, and then looking at what things we might want to add to our program of service to serve the community. This is a chart showing the average single-family tax bill increase. We show it often. Last year, we had an increase of $731. At this point last year, we were projecting an increase of over $1,100. So certainly understanding that we're making estimates at this point, and that we don't set the actual tax rate until November of each year. So for FY24, given current budget, we're projecting an $896 increase. There are several items outstanding that we don't know at this point, and so we just want to be clear about that. One is our insurance budget. The longer that we wait, we're experience rated, so the longer that we wait, the better experience we hope to get, which will decrease that percentage increase. We're also waiting to get the assessment for Assabet Valley Technical High School, and one of the most important things that we're waiting for is our state aid numbers. We typically get those numbers in January. The governor puts out House 1, and so we use those numbers as an estimate. We don't have that this year with the change in administration. The state budget actually isn't due until March. So Governor Healy has promised that in February we would get preliminary numbers, so we're just hoping that we'll see those numbers soon, and then we can put them into our budget. We have some union contracts outstanding. And then we also have the landfill budget. This just shows some of the estimated increase and the tax impact. So you'll see that the estimated increase for fiscal '24 compared to fiscal '23. Again, the town budget numbers don't include the 4 union contracts that we have outstanding. I'm just going to talk more about the town budget for now. So the salary and wages increase is at 1.49%. Again, just reminding you, it doesn't include those 4 union contracts. So we're talking about one of the unions in the police department, the fire department, the clerical union, and also the DPW union. But at this point, we're looking at that 1.49% increase in salary and wages, and then a 9.87% increase in expenses. Just going through some of the salary and wages increases, some of the, like I told you, those program improvement forms, there were submissions for some additional staffing. A lot of the staffing is recommended by the department head, but is a result of a recommendation by the staffing study that we did a couple years ago. So the police department did a staffing study in 2018, the fire department did a staffing study, and then we did a non-public safety staffing study in 2020. And then we actually also recently completed an information technology assessment, which included some recommendations for additional staffing. So I'll go through these quickly, but looking to add a part-time animal control officer. We currently share that animal control with the town of Grafton. So Grafton pays 38% of that entire budget. We have 1 full-time person for both Westborough and Grafton, so looking to add that part-time position in order to help fill any gaps. In community development, we're looking to add a sustainability coordinator / community development assistant. This is a result in part from the non-public safety staffing study for the need for some additional help in the community development office. And then also the sustainability coordinator, which is an outcome of the climate action plan. We are lucky enough to have a grant that will pay $30,000 of this $70,000 salary that we're proposing. So the impact would be the $5 per average single family. In the Department of Public Works, we would add a maintenance craftsperson in the tree division. So 90% of that salary would be paid for through the general fund, so that's where that $8 comes from. And then 10% would be paid for through the water enterprise fund, so that's paid by user fees. And then in the sewer department, they would add a position that would be 100% paid for by user fees, mostly sewer and then partially water. And then the fire department adding 1 firefighter paramedic, again, an outcome of the staffing study in the fire department. In information technology, adding a network systems administrator. We currently have 2 full-time people for the information technology department for the whole town, and then 1 part-time person. So this would add a 3rd full-time person. And then in the police department, we've already added these 3 patrol officers. We did that using ARPA, or American Rescue Plan money. But the purpose of our strategy was to incrementally add that cost onto the budget. You've heard me talk about that, I think, in the past about the firefighters, because we got a grant for 4 firefighters a few years ago. They incrementally added the cost back onto the budget. We're doing the same thing with ARPA for the 3 patrol officers. And then an increase in hours for the circulation outreach assistant. So a position that we already have, but adding some hours to that. In looking at expenses, just pointing out hazardous waste day, that used to be something that was in the budget. We took it out as a result of COVID. We put it back on the town meeting warrant as an article, and it was approved last year. So we do still have it recommended, and you'll see it on the warrant as part of the regularly recurring articles. In community development, they're going to expand Permit Pro. So if you've had to apply for any permits in the building department, as an example, you've probably used Permit Pro or seen it. This is where people can apply for permits online, and you can actually also track permits for different properties. So if you're looking at whether or not someone got a permit, if you're purchasing a home, or if you need to look at the history of your own home, you can look at that through Permit Pro. Also in information technology, Microsoft 365 migration, putting everyone on the same Microsoft 365 to upgrade all of our computer systems. The police department, I think the chief has already talked to you about body-worn cameras, and so that's something that's already implemented. but we do need to increase the storage of that data, and so it's an increase to the budget of the $13,000. And then in the Youth and Family Services Department, we're continuing to offer this interface referral service. That's a service that's available to all of you, all the residents of the community. If you're looking for any mental health providers, you're able to contact them and they can help you find a mental health provider, which as an outcome of COVID is very difficult to do. So this is a service that has really helped some families. And looking at fixed costs, this is where we see most of our, or some of our larger increases. Our insurance budget increase is 8.7%. A large portion of that is our medical insurance. So we pay 75% of medical insurance for all of our employees and all of our retirees. So when the medical line goes up, which right now we're estimating a 7% increase, it obviously drives a lot of the cost in the insurance budget. Electricity, in the market, probably all of you are seeing an increase to that. So right now, the town has a contract that's good through June of this year for electricity supply. We're watching the market because we do need to sign a new contract. Understanding that the shoulder season, so the spring, is really the best time for us to sign that contract. But right now, we're estimating a 30% increase in electricity. And then in the landfill budget, so you probably all heard that Waste Connections, who purchased Harvey's, is planning to stop the town from accessing the transfer station effective July 1st, 2024. For that final year, so July 1st, 23 to June 30 of 24, they've actually increased their cost per ton. Typically, we see an increase of a couple dollars. Right now, they're estimating a $40 per ton increase. So we're seeing that $191,000 increase. Just looking at our reserves, the town currently has, so you see this in your town meeting books from the Advisory Finance Committee, but just sort of focusing on the comprehensive fiscal management policy, the town works to maintain its reserves of free cash and stabilization between 10 and 15%. So you can see on the bottom where it says GF free cash and stabilization, if all of the free cash articles were approved at town meeting, we would be at that 12.69%, so well within that range under our policies. You've seen this slide before, which is our growth of free cash, that blue line. But one thing we added this year was the use of free cash, so that red line. So usually we use about 18 to 19% of our free cash each year. A lot of that is used for capital items because we want to use it for one-time costs. If we use it for operations, we create a structural deficit. In FY24, we're proposing that we use significantly more than we typically do, so that 4.5, and that's really due to the growth of free cash in fiscal 23. Additionally, there's that green line, so that's new. We're looking to transfer from free cash to stabilization in one of the articles. One of the reasons for doing that, stabilization is really your sort of rainy day fund. And that money really sits aside unless we need it for something extraordinary. And it can be invested. It also can't be spent without a 2/3 vote of town meeting. Whereas free cash can be spent by a majority vote of town meeting. So this is just what I was talking about related to the stabilization fund. So that article is looking to transfer roughly $1.8 million of free cash to stabilization, which will bring the stabilization fund to 4.73. That number is based on the fact that our comprehensive fiscal management policies state that we should have free cash between 5 and 7% of our general fund operating budget. So we're basing the amount that we want to transfer on the current fiscal 23, which is why it's a very specific number, and also why it's not going to bring us to the full 5% in fiscal 24, understanding that as our budget grows, we'll be chasing that 5% number. But we have not transferred to stabilization in several years, and so this is something that our policies require us to look at. We are also using free cash to lower the tax rate. We haven't done that historically, but we did do that in fiscal '21 as a result of COVID. We used $770,000, excuse me, to lower the tax rate. We thought it would take us several years to bridge that gap, but we did have an extraordinary increase in Chapter 70 in fiscal '22, and so we were able to close that gap quickly. In fiscal '23, we were planning to use $1 million to lower the tax rate, but we committed to lowering that $1 million every time we saw savings in the budget. So every time we were able to lower the actual budget, we would lower that number. And so that's how we got to that 471. And then in fiscal '24, trying to work our way off of it, but understanding the need for it, we're at the 450. We also use free cash to fund unfunded liabilities. So we have OPEB or other post-employment benefits. And so this is money that's held in a trust fund for future retiree health insurance. And so that was something we used to fund at $1.1 million in the budget. Because of COVID, we zeroed out that line and we moved it, and we started funding it with free cash. Now we have a strategy. So in fiscal '24, we'll use $200,000 of free cash, and then $200,000 is in the budget. This is just other financial resources that we wanted to point out, but really I wanted to show you at the bottom there that in fiscal '22, total town-wide, so all town departments and school, the town received $4.8 million in grants. So we do pursue alternative funding sources when we can. Just briefly showing you the capital plan, but probably easier to see in the copies of the warrant that I provided. These are just the capital items that we were proposing for each of the departments. We're really working to make the capital plan all-inclusive of all capital needs. And so you'll see some larger projects at the bottom, which still might be proposed as a borrow. So one of them is the Hastings School, for an example, and then the library building improvements and design. And then this is my last slide, showing how your property tax dollars will be spent. This presentation is available on the website so that you can take a closer look at that slide, or we can certainly print it out and send it down to Alma. But it just shows kind of how your projected tax bill will be allocated to different services. So I don't know if we should take questions now. If you have any questions about anything that I presented, I'm happy to take them, and then Amber's going to present on the school budget.
Thank you.
Yes.
Could you explain the Assabet Valley assessment?
Yes.
What it is?
Sure. So we send, it's based on the number of students that we send to the Assabet Valley Technical High School. And so they look at what their budget is, and then they apportion it out to the different communities based on the number of students that we send there.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes.
Where is the senior center reflected on that chart?
On this chart?
Yes.
Let's see. It would be in community services.
Okay, because I didn't see any breakdown on expenses or proposed changes for the senior center.
Yep. So,
Particularly.
yep. So there are no specific, so there was one PIR form, I didn't present it for the senior center because it doesn't have an actual tax impact. The senior center did propose increasing several of hours for several positions, outreach positions, handyman position, those types of positions. What we're really excited about, and what you've probably all heard about many times, is the senior needs assessment. So the senior needs assessment, which I hope you all participated in, the results of that are coming out in March. And so once we receive that report, we'll prepare, warrant articles going forward. So, looking forward to getting those responses so that we can understand how we want to strategically make improvements.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can I ask you to back up one slide?
Sure.
There,
Sorry.
stop. Okay, so there's $193,000 left in ARPA funds.
Yes.
Okay,
Currently.
and those can be used for capital projects, emergency repair, and police personnel?
So actually, that's the recent use of funds. So we received $5.7 million in American Rescue Plan funds. And so they have to be committed by the end of 2024. And so we have done, so we work through an internal process where departments are able to submit for their ARPA fund requests. And then the finance team internally reviews those, makes recommendations to the finance committee, and then the finance committee recommends to the select board, who makes the award.
And how are they restricted, or how can they be used?
They can be used on just about anything.
Municipal.
We received it as a result of COVID, but they can be used on infrastructure. So we used funds for the Armstrong Roof Project,
Okay.
the high school chillers, things that we would typically see on capital funds, used for capital funds, and then we did those 3 police officers.
Okay.
We do have, right now we have 193,000 that's not committed, but as we work through the projects, we're finding that, people might recognize savings, or maybe the contracts are less, and so money might drop down to that bottom line and increase in the future.
And when will you have the result of the 4 union contracts?
Very soon. Yeah,
Before
before
town
town meeting,
meeting.
yes, yeah.
Okay, and then you can publicize what that's going to
Yes,
mean.
yeah.
And then can you back up one more slide? I think there was something, okay, so, okay, maybe that was not. Okay, that's fine.
That's okay.
Thank you.
So so you can all see the union contracts, except for fire, most of them are outstanding from fiscal '23. So there's an article on here to fund the first year of the union contracts in fiscal '23, and then any increases would be included in the budget article.
Okay, but that will definitely increase the tax
Yes.
per household.
That would, yes.
Okay.
Understanding that we're still waiting for those other numbers to come in, the
Right.
state aid numbers, insurance numbers.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Dominic?
So the way I see it, you've produced a budget here that increases taxes even more this year than last year. And it'll go up even more with the settlements of the union contracts, right?
Yep, so it's estimating an increase. One of the things that I think is important to point out is that last year, we
No, I'm
didn't.
familiar with that.
No, well, I can just let everyone know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So last year, we didn't include, there were proposals for a lot of these positions and a lot of these expenses in last year's budget. And due to the increase in the residential value, we took all of those out of the budget. So we didn't propose any additional personnel in the fiscal '23 budget in recognition of that increase in value that was driving the increase in taxes. This year, we are projecting that higher amount at this point, but it is inclusive of a lot of those additional services.
I do have one more question. What about Amazon? What about tax coming in from the corporate development that's going on in this place? And how, will some of that be coming in time for this budget?
So the assessor does all of that work. This year is actually, one of the articles on here is the reval for the assessing department. So that's some of the things that we watch during the year. And again, your tax rate isn't set until November. So a lot of these numbers that you're talking about haven't even come in yet to the assessor's office. So we can't, we try to estimate them, but we can't project exactly what they will be. We try to be really conservative, and that's why we traditionally see the number that's estimated at this point go down, but we can't commit to that because we certainly don't know.
Right, okay, we can certainly hope.
Yes.
I read your last report about the, I believe it's a shop center, where the state is planning to house a significant number of homeless families.
Yes.
Are they going to be new people into town, like illegal immigrants, or are they going to be people that are already here? And what resources are they going to demand that you're going to have to provide that's going to cost us money?
I'm just going to show, I just want to show. So if folks aren't familiar with what's being asked about, the state continues to own some of the property up at the Westborough State Hospital. And the Sharp building, which was a DYS facility, is being converted to a homeless shelter. This is something that we found out about in late January, and I'm just pulling this up so that you can see on the town's website. We've created an FAQ because we have received a lot of questions about this, similar to the ones that were just asked. From the state, we do already have homeless individuals staying in a lot of the hotels in Westborough, and so the state has committed that they would prioritize moving those folks into the shelter. The expectation is that the shelter would house 20 families, and they provide, and there's an on-site service provider. We're working with the state to understand what other sort of support they would need or expect from the community. But I don't have all the answers at this point.
And what about the other hotels in town? Are people supposed to be housed in the extended stay hotels?
They do use.
Currently
Yeah,
are.
they do use those. Yeah.
But I mean, there's, we heard there was like 300 people coming or something like that. I mean, do you know what the number is?
So 20 families would be in the
20
Sharp
families,
building.
okay.
We asked about that specifically because we had the same question,
Right.
because it is a large building. But they did say that their shelters, typically they can only support, roughly 20 families.
And refresh my memory, is that the youth boys facility, youth girls facility, or the large building when you're entering the parking lot? I thought that was the Allen building, was the large brick
Yeah,
building.
Sharp Building's further down. It's the end, it's almost in Northborough.
Oh, okay.
It's further down.
Is it visible from the Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller Drive?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. So it's not the Allen building?
It's not the Allen building.
And it's not the
No.
DYS facilities that are there? It's some other building further north? Okay.
But I think the kind of range in numbers that people,
Certainly the schools, Kristi and I have been working very closely with the state on this and talking to our representatives and asking for structure information and support, as well as kind of pressing them on what their kind of formula is for impact at each town level, so.
What the needs are gonna be.
Exactly, like you look at a small community, I mean, our food pantry is volunteer only, the schools have a capacity,
Right.
the town's resources for transportation are limited to that area, all those impacts. And so while it has advantageous structures because these extended stay hotels have certainly found their niche in contracting with the state for housing, the development of the Sharp building will provide an opportunity to then release those hotels back to their more regular purpose. But there will be a school impact, so certainly we have currently 16 students with us already who are deemed as homeless and housed in a variety of situations in our community. And we anticipate from the additional 20 families that will come to the Sharp building that we will have students from there as well. So for me, it's the burden of worrying about transportation, and we can't. Transportation crisis at the school level has continued to be incredibly problematic. Just busing our own students, as well as busing our special education students in the van servicing, and they've just struggled to maintain drivers. So. It certainly is a part of the complexity because some of those homeless families can self-select to still be transported to their last home of residence. So if they lost their housing from Worcester or they lost their housing from Framingham, if they're housed with us, they can select to still be transported back to their school, or they can select to enroll with us.
Oh, wow.
So it's just the whole process is one that's going to take a lot of layers of support.
Does the state give a stipend for any of this, or they just
Well, they
provide the
gave an
housing?
emergency grant of $1,000 per student that we had to apply for, and we have applied. I think they will give us some additional layers of funding, and they layer in social support, wraparound coordinated service support. So there are on-site coordinators. I mean, I think Kristi's done a great job to really push the state to give us more detail, more information, and follow through, as has Jeff, Lourie, really making sure that they're taking accountability at the state level to provide the kinds of supports they should for families that have had trauma and complexity.
Right.
so.
There's also a
Okay,
reimbursement
sounds like you're on
for
top of it.
We also get a reimbursement for transportation, so there is like a 50-50 split with communities, and then they're gonna provide additional funding as well.
Okay.
Is there a timeline for completion of that shelter?
Well, they started talking to, I think May is their target, but they have to sprinkle the whole building. Yeah, they have to sprinkle the whole building, which is why people heard it was gonna be a giant number, because I think they're only going to use one main floor to provide really renovation and housing, but because it's a large building, the fire department made them sprinkle the whole building, all 3 floors.
So by May.
So there's potential for more growth.
So we
Yeah.
can anticipate an additional tax burden
You're looking at 300.
for this new program.
I mean, certainly, as Amber talked about, enrolling students, but, you know, she'll have to, we don't know
Yeah.
what that means. I mean, we don't know what grade level they're coming in at, how spread out that is, and, you know, certainly the school will work to figure out what that means. In terms of other support services, we're just not sure yet exactly what will be expected.
But it's not going to go down.
Not as a result of this, no.
I don't think anything's gonna go
I think it's important to just note that Massachusetts is a right to shelter state, and Westborough is not unique in terms of having, you know, this type of conversation. It is happening in communities across the Commonwealth in terms of trying to create shelter to support these families.
I think it's come from a combination of things. It's come from the lift in the COVID rent caps that were in place. And so there's lots of families at the rollover of their leases that are getting displaced, as are older residents in communities as well. So the housing crisis isn't just families, it's a whole range of people across the layout of rental structure, and they're really struggling then to find other places to be housed. I also think there are some components of this which are immigrant families, but it's a lower percentage against actually families displaced in our own state who are now struggling to find housing. I don't think, just to answer your question right now, I mean, obviously, I have a whole range of concerns around this so that we can be prepared, we can do what we need to do, and we can service students without them disrupting the flow of the year as well. It's complicated when you're layering students into classes. It's the middle of the year, you're in a good rhythm, you're trying to close COVID gaps with kids who have already been traumatized, and then you've got these other families joining us, and it can cause, you know, just a fragmentation. So we're focusing on trying to be prepared, but I don't see additional impact in staffing. I mean, we would be trying to absorb those students, as we usually do mid-year, into classrooms that already exist. Like, I'm gonna go hire another second grade teacher and divide up all the classes. That's why when we're pushing the state, I'm like, it's illogical to give us too many kids. Like, our structure's in place for the year. You don't reconstruct that mid-year. So at this point, we would be hoping to absorb all of those students without additional cost.
I wasn't thinking specifically of schools, I was thinking of the whole community.
The whole community,
and
Jeff
services.
certainly has articulated the same concern around changes in calls and need to offer support. I do think the state has been very good to indicate that they were putting like the social service coordinator on site, and there is an on-site coordinator there to help and support families, and I believe security.
Yeah, so they'll offer security, but all these calls that we're talking about, Chief Lourie, Chief Purcell, we're all in the conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just to change the subject, although you touched on this, probably generating more emotion is the whole topic of the transfer station, and the consequence of that, realizing if you ever stood by the rotary how much traffic comes into Westborough that are big dumpsters, etc. And my own anecdotal experience just this week, I needed to dispose of a box spring and a mattress, and the transfer station monitor sheepishly said, that's $300, which shocked me, frankly, but I didn't have much that I could do about it. I'm going to say somewhat jokingly, maybe we should allocate money to pick up mattresses on the side of the road. But I see this as an impending problem. I'm sure you realize this already. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So we actually, even in advance of getting that notice from Waste Connections, formerly Harvey's, had put together a, what we call a Waste Management Exploratory Committee, just to try to understand how we might actually improve our waste management structure. And so they had already started looking at alternative programs. A lot of the ideas at the time included keeping the transfer station access, but then again, we recently found out that we won't have it effective July 1st, 2024. So I do think, a lot of the alternatives that this committee is looking at include the town contracting with a trash hauler and residents being able to participate in that at some financial level. So right now you pay for your transfer station sticker, and there's also a cost in your taxes already related to the current program that we have. And so working through the financials of how that would work would be proposed to the select board. They're hoping to propose it in March to the select board and to really start presenting it to the community in advance of the October town meeting, where we might need to set up a new fund or make adjustments to that transfer station budget. So understand that we're talking about not just sort of your typical trash, but maybe larger items, definitely larger items like mattresses, construction materials, all the different things that people have to dispose of. Understanding that there might be an alternative location for yard waste and how we might handle that. So we're really looking at all of those options. The Waste Management Exploratory Committee, those are open meetings. Invite anybody to participate in those. But we are looking at it. The good news is we were already looking at it, but it is going to be a big change for the community.
The article in the newspaper talks about the transfer station. What about the yard waste area?
Yeah, so that's something that we have to continue to look at. So there are some.
Is that going to be continually available? Is that going to be closed off to the community?
At the
Are we going to be
current
prevented
yard
from
waste
using
area?
Hello?
I believe so. We haven't negotiated that final contract yet with Harvey's.
What about working with Harvey's to generate a positive, effective, conscientious relationship so that they don't pull the rug out from under us? A lot of the complaints, I've read the article and I go to the dump on a regular basis, and I really pay attention to what's going on. A lot of the complaints that they have are totally justified and totally the responsibility and caused by the town of Westborough. And if you need a list of them, I'll come to your office and I'll give you in detail a list of what you're doing wrong.
So we've tried to, and I think this is part of what you're speaking to, we have asked Harvey's if we could staff the transfer station with on-site monitors in order to help with some of the things. And Harvey's has told us no, that they're not going to allow us to put staff there or volunteers there. Excuse me, it is a liability for them. I think that there are several things that sort of changed with Harvey's, and I think one of the biggest is that they moved to, now they were purchased by Waste Connections, and Waste Connections is making that decision.
Well, I'm going to talk to these people and find out whether or not there's a road back based on the behavior of the town of Westborough and its management.
In waste management, is that this new company? I just heard about this a few weeks ago, but is this new company, is this the way towns are going? In other words, is that?
Waste Connections purchased Harvey's.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
They want to close down a landfill. Is that what's happening in other towns?
No,
there are several communities that do the pay-as-you-throw, which you may have heard about, or the town's contract with a different trash hauler. And there might be like an enterprise fund set up, so you might pay a fee and then you get your trash picked up.
So they're going to do it whatever they want now. I mean, they want a certain way to do it.
The Waste Connections? Yeah, they want to close that access to the transfer station. They could potentially bid on a contract, with the town in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Just a little more detail. There's an opening to the Harvey's Waste Connections property in Westborough, and there's one in Hopkinton, right? Now, the one in Hopkinton services the vegetation disposal. It also services the town of Hopkinton. Are you familiar with that, the bins? Are they going to close access for the people from the town of Hopkinton? Did you bring that up?
I don't know if they're gonna close that for Hopkinton. They told us that they're gonna close the transfer station. It was a meeting, it wasn't even a negotiating session related to the contract. They just told us in an informational meeting. So I don't have that information about how they're treating the town of Hopkinton. In terms of yard waste, I don't have that information.
All right, I'll look into it.
Let me just ask, is it pretty much one or the other? Most towns either pay for collection services or you buy by the trash bag, and then do you bring it yourself, or you put the bags at the curb? There's a lot of, it seems like taking things to the dump isn't probably as common today as it might have been 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Right, so we actually, the group that I'm talking about, even before we set up that committee, has been looking at a lot of different options, and a lot of them are curbside, because that's what you see in most communities.
Right, okay.
I appreciate the questions about this, and I know that it's of high interest, but I just want to make sure that Amber has a chance to do her presentation.
I'm happy just to let you know. I'm very happy to see all of you.
Let's talk some
trash. I can give a few highlights. I mean, Kristi's budget gives you the big picture
Microphone,
of,
please.
Town meeting, but I can definitely give you a few.
I can give you a few highlights. Again, I think it works very nicely when Kristi and I are able to come and present together, because I think it represents the composite of what you'll experience at town meeting. And I'll give you a couple highlights of our upcoming budget. I will say that currently, while she's pulling this up, I am in contract negotiations with all of our units. So currently, this is our contract year for every unit in the Westborough Public Schools. So the administrative assistance unit, the para-educator unit, the teacher unit, the admin, the custodians, the lunch service providers. So one, it makes for a very busy year. You're in a lot of personal meetings. Those are up close negotiations. I sit on 3 of those 5 teams. And so we're currently coming to closure on the vast majority of them. I think the good news is that our budget has the anticipated settlement of all those contracted units included in our budget. So I won't be coming back for additional funds for contracts. So our contracts for all of those settlements are moving forward to be completed, hopefully by town meeting. I'm close on the last 3. And we have a voted agreement with the Unit A teachers, so that's the largest percentage budget to settle. And we're now moving forward to finalize lunch service providers, paraeducators, and again, all of them are really looking to leverage good contracts for themselves. We're having trouble hiring people. You see these trends. I mean, there's no surprises that a lot of the service-oriented industry supports are pushing for higher wages, and we're struggling to find people. So you see that impact in our overall budget planning. Kristi also highlighted when she spoke with you the cost of increase in electricity and fuel and services definitely impacted the buildings and grounds budget at about $300,000 of fixed cost increase just for new contracts for electricity, oil, and our other service costs.
So, hold on. I think the mic is, I think I killed it.
That's all we're allowed to say.
That's it, I'm done. I will, that's fine.
Time's up.
I'll give you a couple highlights, and I can use my teacher voice. I think one of the things I wanted to be able to share with you, as well as our budget, is kind of a welcome back to students recovering from all of us, you recovering, me recovering from 2.5 years of incredible trauma with the COVID pandemic and what it did to the mental health of all of us, but to really young people in particular as well, who have struggled to recover both academically and emotionally. We've seen a large increase in the percentages of students with anxiety, performance issues, school phobia, just a higher incidence of concerns. And so for us, it's been about making sure that we're keeping up close on personal relationships with students. But I think the really good news is we're seeing a recovery that feels like students are starting to look more typical to us again in terms of who they've been. Last year was very fragile. I think middle of this year, we're starting to feel like they're acting and behaving like students do again in ways that look very typical to us. I think the good news is that you see all of, I'm gonna just share some photos. It's hard to picture what schools are like often. Here are active robotics clubs. We have a giant robotics club at the high school, probably up around 80 students who are at the high school pretty much 7 days a week. This is a Saturday work session, and that's Saturday. And they are there working on building their robot, collaborating with a whole team of adult volunteers, a lot of retired engineers who enjoy working with youth up close. This is what it's like when you're running a public school. You've got 24/7, the high school is pretty much open 7 days a week, as students are kind of living and accessing clubs, organizations, and bringing students together. This is middle school teams, after-school club, looking at building small robots and having team opportunity and time together. Our fine arts groups are continuing to recover. We had actually a drop-off in participation because there were 2 years where they couldn't come together and practice. And so students that didn't pick up an instrument might never. And so we had a gap in numbers, and now we're seeing a recovery as like the typical third graders have started taking an instrument again. I think highlights for you to think about in terms of just what the school experience is like. You have high numbers, 80%, 65% of students taking fine arts, which are elective courses in their high school experience. You have 29 fine arts clubs, vocal groups. Very, very proud of the fact that our band, our singing groups, participate in coming to a lot of town events and provide music and support to enhance veterans events, school and civic events, and any of the times that you need people to perform. We see the Westborough Fine Arts Group as a part of that, and you can always call us, and we're happy to have them come and sing and perform as a part of the experience of events. I think lastly, we continue to send students to fine arts competitions where they do incredibly well. We also continue to see a spring back into very robust athletics, students participating successfully, and all of that takes time and energy and stipended club support funding for faculty who run all of those activities and provide those enhancements of the student experience for what it is as you kind of live in a high school. I mean, Terry knows it's a busy place all the time. Just in terms of what life is like on the ground, you also like to know that all of the traditional, enjoyable things that make schools special continue to take place in the Westborough Public Schools. You see here an example of what learning looks like. You've got kids doing their writing, they're on their computers, they're in a small group, getting very targeted instructional support from their teacher. That's a third grade classroom at Hastings. Here you see our traditional Thanksgiving feast where all the kindergartners come together and share their snack for Thanksgiving, and after they've learned about kind of the traditions of Thanksgiving, and they've all come together, and that's a Hastings. And then you see a Halloween parade there on your right. So you're always making sure that what we're working to do is to provide those traditions, those supports, and those specialized experiences that make school and traditions and learning really important, as well as all of your academics. You see here our senior march-in, which we continue to do annually with the senior opening day parade. Again, a tradition of, I think, what makes high school and Westborough schooling unique is that we've maintained a lot of those traditions and experiences that they build memories on and makes them feel connected to the school experience. You see there we have a support dog. We have actually 2 support dogs at Mill Pond that are in school full-time, one with a guidance counselor and then one in a classroom. So, you know, schools are both different than when we were there. You know, there weren't many security dogs walking around to provide emotional support. But I think there's this beautiful evolution of schools
being flexible spaces that are warm and welcoming and supportive across whatever the needs of students are that present to us. I want to just celebrate that we were finally able to open the Fales School, a project at the town level that has gone very well. It is a net zero building, so it will provide, it has solar and geothermal as its base. So right now, its solar panel is actually giving us electrical credits back, and we're accruing those. The building is beautiful. Many of you, I saw some of you at the ribbon cutting. Again, it's a very nice space, and should you ever want a tour or an opportunity to visit, just, you can ask and I'll take you, and you can visit and see what a nice building it is. Lastly, I like to provide an opportunity to say thank you to our community. There's Borough Sugar Shack, which is the Borough program, our 18 to 22-year-old students with complex learning needs who require that we continue to educate them through 22. Continue to have a thriving program at the Borough Sugar Shack, where our store has continued to be their vocational training setting, and they are doing incredibly well. We also are proud of the fact that we're providing a viable business back into the community and a good storefront and an opportunity for people to come to our community and shop and enjoy being here in Westborough. It's been very exciting to see our sales increase so that the workload for students and the challenges it provides for them to get really on-site training has been very, very successful, such that we have 3 of our graduates who now work at different businesses in Westborough. So they're getting the on-the-ground vocational training that are hireable at Lowe's and other places to participate and make a living, which is very exciting and what we would want from that kind of programming. All of that's part of the Westborough Public Schools and what it takes to kind of run a district. We don't often, I think, Westborough itself is a somewhat modest community in terms of how we present, not boastful. We try to just take that old New England way of coming at it, do the work and get it done, and I think that at the same time, I think it's important to know that the district continues to perform very, very well and to be able to provide a very strong education from our students' experience. And we rank very, very well across, really in the top 20% of the state continually, in a community where, we are paying for that. It's expensive, and I want to continue to talk about that as we look at budgeting, but acknowledging that our students are doing really well. So I'll give you a couple stats on which the budget is based. We are not requesting new positions. It's good to see us come to a stabilization where new FTE is not required. So for years, this is my 9th year, and in our first 4 years, we were adding staff year over year as the enrollment grew. But now we've reached, in the last 3 years, a stabilization of enrollment. So currently, we're just under 4,000 students, and that tends to be about where we've hovered. And so of those students, though, their complexity continues to be quite a bit. We have 16% of our students who require special education support. So you've got, embedded in there 600 students who have special needs. You have another 600 students who speak a second language, who either come in with no English or limited English, who require that we teach them English so they can then access their schooling. That's a tremendous undertaking when you think about that. When you just do that number and you say, 430 students, 23 students who don't speak English, who require us to provide the development of that skill set so they can start to access their education. We have all of those students embedded in our district, and we're able to move them forward successfully such that our performance level remains very high, even with those complex students. So we're providing strong education for them to move them forward to be productive citizens and to be able to contribute in Westborough and beyond.
What is FLEP?
FLEPs are students who have gained enough language to be independent, but we have to track them for 4 additional years. So you come in, you're like a level 1 or 2, meaning no English or a little English. And then by the time you reach levels 3 and 4, you flip out of direct programming, which means we're not providing English programming for you. You're built into your typical school experience. And then we track you with performance assessments to make sure that you're doing well. I think the other thing that's interesting, there's an interesting number there, that since August 31st, we've enrolled 536 new students. So I just want you to take in that number for a minute. I want you to think about that, because I think all of you picture school oftentimes the way we had school. I mean, I'm 60. I went to school, my parents only moved in the summer when they could move and start me in the fall and end me in the fall. You get all your new students at the beginning. You didn't have a lot of change. It was a big deal if you got a new kid during the year, you know. That was the typical way we were all educated. That's just not what the world is now anymore. It's very fluid. Students are coming and going continually. Our number is stable, but we've brought in 538 since August 31st. Which means we also have students leaving. So the volatility of what it is to provide educational continuity is very hard. You're trying to bring those students in, put them into class, get them started on schedules and meet their needs academically, such that they don't impact your overall performance. You want to maintain a quality district, and you're trying to keep yourselves in the mix for that. But 500 students, so it's just a continual evolution of kind of coming and going. I think it's just important to be able to picture and understand that schools are such different places than they were years ago. And I think we manage it well, but it's a different level of complexity. I'll say that when you look at the design of our budget, you can see that all of our money's in people. This is a $63 million budget. We carry an additional $7 million in grants and revolving accounts. So annually, this is the part that hits the town meeting budget that Kristi presented to you. And this year, when you look at our budget, it originally, represents this year a 4.1% increase. Again, that was revised, initially came in at about 4.6%. We did some additional cuts, moved some other things onto revolving accounts, and the school committee voted a 4.1% increase to the budget. And again, I think some of that's inclusive of the impact of the first year contracts. So, you know, again, you've got 6 contract units that are all going to have new contracts built into this annual increase for this year. You see some of the impacts. There's a modest, again, 2% increase to building budgets. We've level funded building budgets for about the last 5 years, but the cost of inflation against the cost of just supplies has impacted them on a level that we gave all the buildings a 2% increase just to cover some of the bulk increase in purchasing of paper and supplies at the building levels. One of the increases you saw that there's a $500,000 increase in buildings and grounds. Again, facilities operation, they're 572. 300 of that's just the fixed costs for increases in electricity and fuel. We have those contracts fixed now for the next 3 years, I think. You've got another one that's got to be done. So those are the impact areas for us. I'll give you 1 or 2 other highlights. You see a trajectory of our budget history. Again, it varies year to year. Non-contract years, you tend to have lower percent increases. Other types of impacts, we're not adding programming, so you see a stabilization in those percentages. Last year, we had a high increase because we went back to town meeting in October because we had an unexpected outplacement of 6 students to out of district, which is incredibly expensive and left us with about $1 million deficit. We're seeing some relief from that in this year's budgeting. We have 4 students aging out of programming that were in outside placements, so the SPED budget has dropped back down to a more anticipated out of district cost.
That's a big budget though.
It is a big budget.
Now, how much is the sugar factory taking? No, as far as number of students?
They have 11 students currently programmed in that space. So if you think about those students for a minute as an example, those 11 students, if we didn't house that program, would all be out of district placements. your average out-of-district placements, on average, about $60,000 a year, to as high as 150. It depends on what the placement is. But if you take the lowest average, so of those 11 students at $60,000 on average, plus you would then also have to pay for transportation. So you've got another 20,000 per student potentially around transportation costs. So it's very advantageous for us when we can build in-house programs, and if you've got 11 students in there, you're able to have programming and your offsets are still at a cost savings to what it would be to have them outside of the community. And also to be facing costs with them that you can't cap. The increase in out-of-district placements is anticipated to go up 14% next year, which is, just an unexpectedly huge increase. It's usually averaged between, 2 to 3% annually. So everybody, all the districts in Massachusetts are kind of arguing against that increased percentage and trying to push back on asking for more Chapter 70 money, which I'm hoping that we'll see.
What's the out-of-district population right now?
So the out-of-district population right now is 29 students. It had been up around 34, and we've had some age out, and we had 2 move out of town. But again, when you've got the volatility of 500 kids coming and going, you can, I could come in Monday and find we've got 2 kids that are, outplaced, and we just have to provide that coverage.
Well, you took the trouble to find out how many kids are coming in. How many kids are going out of the system?
Well, I could grab that number for you. I mean, we're roughly stable. We're not swinging over 4,000. So there, some are graduating out. So annually you graduate out your graduating class. You bring in your new kindergarten class, and there's usually a gap there. So, but those were all done before August. So these are all literally the rollovers since.
So the people leaving are some people graduating.
Well, the 539 that I put in that number was since August 31st, so they had already graduated. So those are students enrolling after August. Yeah, so after August 31st.
So I'd like to know the number of students unenrolling after August.
Well, I mean, I can give you our average, our average.
I'll come to your office again.
Yeah, I mean, our average enrollment hasn't gone over 4,000, so you've got other students leaving. So at this point, it's, like I'll usually see some type of a notation of so-and-so's leaving, goodbye. Like I get all the emails. So you have students that are moving, you have students relocating, you have families leaving town, and and then you have students who are self-selecting to, attend a private school or whatever. You've got all that movement. So we haven't gone over 4,000 students, so it's typically kind of a trade game, but it's been on average stable.
Okay.
Terry.
I have kind of a joint question. A number of years ago, my students did a project, and they showed that if you covered the parking lots with solar panels, this kind of goes to Kristi too, you could provide almost all the electricity that the high school needs. Have you looked into doing that?
Yeah, so I think
schools?
I'll let Kristi speak about the solar contract that the town.
We do have the Sustainable Westborough Committee is looking at different opportunities for solar placement on town buildings. And I know one of them's at the DPW, and I think there's a couple other school buildings on that list. We also, the town has entered, in 2012, the town entered these 20-year agreements for their virtual net metering. And so it does reduce what we currently pay. But the challenge is, if we create our own electricity, we're still having to pay the folks we've contracted with what's owed to them. So if we create our own electricity, we also have these other contracts that we need to come under or abide by. So the challenge is that it might actually cost us more while we're under these agreements, because we only have so much headroom under these agreements.
So you said you're negotiating, right?
No, so those are different contracts. So these are virtual net metering contracts, and they're 20-year agreements. They were approved by town meeting back then. A lot of communities entered them, and I think a lot of communities are facing a similar challenge, and that we want to create our own electricity. We are continuing to look at that, and we have done things. I mean, the school certainly has done some things to create its own electricity. under that sort of headroom that we have related to the contracts. And so we want to be prepared to do more, making sure that we're still under that threshold, that the contracts continue to be a savings and not an additional expense.
Is that the program that gives us the reduced wattage rate?
No, that's actually a different program.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's the aggregation plan, and that's actually not available to town buildings. So it's only available to residents.
I think it's good to start to anticipate the potentials to increase solar when we tap out that contract cap, which is gonna be, what, 8 more years? So I think we're anticipating that. I know that when we do roof assessments now, we have built in that in the design assessment, they should let us know if a roof can carry solar. And we definitely are interested in doing the covered parking lot in the teacher parking lot side area there that you're speaking about. Yeah, Hastings roof has a lot of capacity and actually has a really, appears to be at the initial assessment, a very strong steel infrastructure. So it could carry solar probably.
And their parking lot is huge.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. I'm trying to picture what it would be like to have all our buildings with those parking structures. But again, I think we will participate at the town level in gaining that information. I think, yeah.
Out of the 4,000 students, what percentage is special needs?
16%, which is slightly below the state average, which is 18. So we're kind of typical in that sense. One of the things I think people are trying to figure out when you kind of listen to a school presentation or budget presentation is kind of like, so where are we in the mix? Our budget percentage increase follows a trajectory of like about smack in the middle of increase for our comparative communities. And I have some slides I can show you that give you those bar graphs. This is this year's, the districts we could gather what their current percentage increases are looking like this year. So you can see ours is the red line. So we're one of the smaller percentage increases in at least these districts. The one in green there is Hopkinton. They're coming in at about 8.5%. So, I think you're seeing a lot of districts struggling with the impact of programming and cost increases. And certainly are carrying percentages that are around, it looks like the average is going to be 4% to 8%. So we're trying to keep ours on the lower end of that. I'm just going to hop through to another. One of the things people sometimes ask us about are other areas of cost offset. So typically, our revolving accounts carry and our grants carry about $7 million of our cost. Our circuit breaker is funding we get from the state to help us pay for students that are out of district placed, the 29 students. Currently, we receive about 1.8 million. So that, again, helps to offset sped costs. And the Chapter 70 goes into Kristi's budget development and typically comes to the town. I think this year it's being carried at the 11,767,000. I think both Kristi and I are hopeful that that number will be higher. We're pushing on the state, as are many districts, to say that Chapter 70 should have been more responsive to come in at a higher rate, given that they've allowed out of district placements to increase it 14%, which is just going to crush a lot of budgets. And lastly, we try to do our part to do the legwork to return funding to the town. Currently, our Medicaid, we do all the paperwork to submit Medicaid reimbursement for students with special needs that require certain types of PT service delivery, OT, physical mobility work. We can submit to the state to get a percentage of that cost reimbursed to us through Medicaid. And so we do that legwork to submit, and to date, to this year so far through, since September to December, we've returned the $276,000. We anticipate equal to that hopefully by the end of the year, so it'll be close to $600,000 going back to the town to contribute towards lowering tax impacts. I think a lot of people don't realize what funding levels we do get from the state, so it's nice to have. I'm just going to hop down to one or two. There's a little bit, but this is our average per pupil expenditure is $18,293, and that is smack in the middle of our competitive communities. So while I will be the first to acknowledge, so Bobby, it's an expensive job to educate students. You want to know that we're trying to keep that cost competitive within the range of what it's generally costing other public educators to spend, and so we think we're doing that.
A quick question, is that a fully loaded cost? All
Yeah,
the
that's a great
benefits?
question. It's all in inclusive of health coverage costs, not debt. So it doesn't include the borrowing for building.
Okay.
But it's an apples to apples in terms of other communities, and it's inclusive of what they spend on students and their impact of salary and health coverage at the town level. Yeah.
Question here. I see all your slides about all the clubs, all the fancy things that the kids are getting to do.
Yeah.
You go to a grocery store and you have a $15.16 bill. You give them a 20 and the 16 cents. If they've already put that in the machine, you're going to end up with $7, $8 extra because they don't know how to do anything other than what the computer tells them.
Yeah.
I see our education is geared towards college or whatever, and these kids have no common sense. There's nothing, you can't teach common sense, but you can teach basic math skills.
Well,
I don't see that coming out of the
Yeah, I can reassure you that Westborough students can make change.
I
have a lot of
guarantee you they
confidence.
cannot.
Well, I'm not sure that, I won't argue the point with you until you want to come in and spend time with Westborough students. I don't know who's working at the grocery store. I usually know which ones are my kids and not, but people are hired from a variety
You
of
say to
places.
them, where do you go to school? Oh, go to Westborough. Go here.
Yeah,
Very seldom do I see anybody out of Westborough.
yeah. Well, I do think that we are educating them at a level to be able to do that. I'm sorry that you've experienced that.
It's more than once.
Yeah.
I'm not talking, and I bet you everybody in this room has had that experience.
I absolutely had that experience.
Yeah.
They couldn't make, if you gave them, if the bill included a 20-cent refund and you gave them the 80 cents, they wouldn't know what to do with it. Maybe they could figure it out with their phone, but
Yeah.
not in their head.
Well, maybe I could
So-
suggest an objective measure would be
Yeah.
MCAS. So
Yes.
MCAS measures math skills.
Yeah, so there are math 10th grade exit scores, which were one of the highest in the state after 2 years of COVID. So structurally, we certainly are teaching our kids competency in mathematics. I don't represent any group in generalizations. I think that Westborough students are good kids. They work hard. We're educating them, and they're leaving and doing well. Just like I don't generalize senior citizens and what you can and can't do. I would think we would not step away from this breakfast and generalize the behaviors of this group to be all the same. So I would say I feel pretty strongly that we not generalize the youth of today into overarching statements of competency. So we have kids that struggle. We also have kids that do and don't work, and kids that have immense skills and are merit scholars at the national level, and kids who probably do struggle to do math. But I think, our job is to take them from where they are and to take them through graduation and assure that they can be, reasonably employed.
I don't have a problem with people making change because I can do it. So I
Yeah.
just tell them what the change is.
Okay.
That isn't a problem.
Yeah.
What I have a problem with is that chart you removed that had the per pupil cost.
Yeah.
Well, the per pupil cost isn't what we pay. We pay the per pupil cost times the number of pupils. And what I'd like to see is the per pupil student load on the population. In other words, if there's 20,000 residents in the community and
Yeah.
4,000 students, that is 4 over 20, that's 20%, right? Of the population. I'd like to see it for all those comparative communities, what their student population is relative to the community. That is the cost to me. The per pupil cost is irrelevant because it doesn't complete the math problem, the word problem, which is your bill will be per pupil cost times the number of pupils into the amount of residents.
Right.
And I'd like to see that math. But I'll come by your office to pick it up.
It's been a while since you visited me, Tom. Come
Oh,
on.
you can't imagine how much
I've missed you.
interest I've accumulated in the
I've
meantime.
missed you. So, again, other questions, we could go on and on a lot. I think that the budget this year hopefully will,
Impress you.
as always. Other questions, yeah.
Totally off the topic of budget, okay? One of the biggest issues that I have, and it's not just the Westborough school system, it's education in our country in general.
Yeah.
We are dumbing down our children. We've taken away them learning how to do cursive. I have a 17-year-old that, because of the school system, and not here in town,
Yeah.
but the school system, they stopped teaching them how to do writing in 3rd grade.
Yeah.
Okay? We go to Washington DC, and she cannot read the Declaration of Independence because it's written out.
Yeah.
It's not printed.
Yeah.
We are also doing that. Today's world is so involved with economics that in the math programs, I feel we should be adding teaching children how to do budgets. I have a neighbor that their child in 5th grade took an after-school program, and it was how to do stocks and bonds. That child is now a senior in high school. She manages all the finances for her family and has taught them how to invest and talk about the money that they have made from the knowledge of the student. I feel somehow this needs to be incorporated because children don't understand what double interest is, and they don't even understand a checkbook. Well, if you need money, you just go to the ATM, and they don't understand that. And somehow, I feel, just in general, that we need to add that to our mathematics program from what they're capable of in kindergarten through so that they learn how to do all these things as part, because that's such an important part of what people need to know today to survive financially in our world.
Yeah, no, all really relevant points. I don't disagree at all. I mean, I have an opportunity to visit all of our buildings across all of our age groups, so I can assure you that our kids still touch coins and count money and look at those structures. They also do have an opportunity to do financial assessment when they do 9th and 10th grade math. They do some of those finances. Similarly, we have clubs and organizations and also some of our specialized electives that go in depth for financial planning, investment, and those types of things. So again, you have to realize you've got students across the whole bell curve of experiences, but we certainly like to hope that our students have competencies, yes. So I see people need to finish up. I'm happy to stay and talk to people individually, as is Kristi, so we'll stay with you. Thank you very much for coming, and we'll make sure that we're available between now and town meeting to continue to talk about it, okay?